This conference will now be recorded.
Well, I guess in the interest of time, we might as well start with something for those of you that made it. Before we start, are there any questions you guys have about WebEOC?
Not at the time, but I'm sure as we start to go along, there's some that might come up.
Okay, good deal. Just wanted to kind of touch on one thing and give it a little reminder that all of the system documentation in WebEOC is available here all the way down here at the bottom of the menu in WebEOC in the WebEOC file library. So we've created documentation on user side stuff. So we've got the user guide, the full user guide in here, and that documents all of the boards that are in common use. And then there is the admin guide in here as well, which goes through all the administrative functions and some specialized documentation. So just be aware that that stuff is in there for you. All of that documentation is really kind of specific to the emergency management piece for WebEOC. So it doesn't really focus on the law enforcement or how the sheriff's office may be using that, because we're still in the process of defining that. But it should give you a good idea of what's in there anyway. So I'll just leave it at that. I guess what we're talking about here this morning is going to be the administrative functions and administrative roles in WebEOC and touch on some of the developer stuff. And please, any questions that come up, just ask me as we're going. Don't be shy. Okay, I see some people are jumping in there. I'll give it another second. Can everyone hear me there now?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Paul, I'm in. Marlon's here.
There we go, Marlon. I just wanted to wait for you to make sure that we have everyone that you need here, and anything specific you're looking to cover at the moment.
Nothing specific. Hold on 1 second. I think I got. Yeah, I think everybody's here. One is late, and one person I think is going to be out today.
Okay.
Good morning, guys. This is Aston.
Good morning. Okay, then let me get started with this. We'll talk about the WebEOC administrative functions and how that works out, and I'll also share some kind of like tips and tricks and best practices and what have you. So when you log into WebEOC, to get to the admin functions, you should have this little gear icon that opens up a new window. What I do, and this is just kind of a best practice, I copy the URL from that new window and I open up another tab and just paste it in there instead. And then I close that new window. So that just keeps it open there, because what happens is if you refresh something in the WebEOC screen, it will close that new window that opens up. So this will stay open. This will stay here. I just find that it's an easier way of doing it, just so you know. I've got the full admin panel going here. So there's functions and pieces that you may not see in your admin profile, but I wanted to give you an idea of all the things that are available in there. And I'll show you a different view of this in a second. But everyone has access to the user view. Now, what you can do here gets kind of defined a little bit by your actual role, and there's different kinds of admin level. I'll touch on that in a little bit. But very simple. The procedures for creating user IDs are outlined in the admin guide, and that just follows kind of a standard procedure. I'll talk about some WebEOC security stuff as well in a little bit, the way that currently works. But creating a user is simple. You can see just basic information. Like I said, it's documented in the user guide. The key thing in WebEOC is really how users get to see and access stuff in WebEOC. So once you create the user ID, you have to add a position to a user. So we have the position list here. This is every position in WebEOC. And if I go down the list, you'll see the HCSO positions there, for example. So once you assign a position to a user, they would have whatever access rights that particular position gets. I'm just going to close that position up. I'm going to open up a test ID we have. So users would get the user section and get assigned to a organization structure in WebEOC, either OEM or HCSO, eventually maybe fire rescue, City of Tampa, etc. And you can see that they get assigned various positions here. Now, the security in WebEOC is based on a least restrictive premise. So there is some challenges about restricting who can see what. So if I am a partial administrator or any kind of admin, I'm a partial administrator in, say, emergency management, I can create a user or I can edit a user and I can assign them any position here. So I could assign them an HCSO position, for example, if I wanted to. And in fact, I believe I did that. So I have an OEM user and they also have access to the HCSO positions. That's currently the way WebEOC kind of works. Now there's other ways of restricting that, and we're working on some other things that we may be able to do about that. But that's kind of the default in WebEOC. Now, if you make someone a partial administrator underneath an organization, they cannot edit other admin users and cannot edit full admin users. You don't have that level of access. So that's the one kind of restriction there, but any other user could be edited in WebEOC. It can also unlock users. So let's see who's locked. If I sort on there you go. So we have a bunch of users that are locked. I'm not going to unlock any of these. They probably need to be locked for some reason. But you can very simply click the unlock user link and unlock them, or you can open up a user that is locked, unlock them, open them up, and let's say they need a password reset. So you'd make sure that change password at next login is locked, give them a new password based on whatever password criteria you want to use, save it, and then when they log in again, they will have to change their password. So user maintenance, your user setup is pretty straightforward, pretty easy. You can also set users to expire at a certain time. So we set up some DHS Border Patrol folks for Super Bowl, and their IDs were set to expire.
Hi, this is Jay. The last I recall from that, Jody was actually wanting to reach out to one of our other customers just to kind of see what they.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up on that. I was losing you. Nope, I didn't get that. Okay. So you can remove the expiration from an ID or go in and reset the expiration. So we had all these DHS folks, their IDs automatically stopped working some number of days after the Super Bowl. They no longer needed it. Eventually, we should probably delete those IDs. They don't need them anymore. So that's a little bit on the user side. So on positions, so these are all the positions in WebEOC. So positions and groups work together to define access. So I'm going to switch to groups for a second. So every board in WebEOC, and this is kind of a best practice approach, we create a group for a board. That group also defines the level of access for boards. You can see, so for COVID collection site testing sites, we have two groups. One is an edit group, so anyone in this group can add information or edit information to that board. And then we have a view-only group. Anyone in this group can see the board, but they can't edit the information. So if I open up that group when it's created, these are the positions that that access this group, that have edit access to the board. And you can define in the group what other things the group has access to. So this is a board access. So this is where the board sits in the group. So we've added the board there, and it has access to the list view with edit permissions in WebEOC. We'll show you how that's done in a second too. You can add other things to it. So let's say members of this group also had another board they needed access to, or they had links or menus or anything else. That can all be added to the group. I try to keep groups fairly limited, so one group should have one kind of access to it. So that's what the group has. So that gives you access to the board. And then if I go over here to positions, well, let's see. If I go over to positions, okay, collection point is a position that has access to it. So if I go to collection point, these are the groups that collection point has access to. So you can see the collection point position has access to that collection site board that we just looked at, as well as other boards that they would use. So any kind of position has access to a bunch of different groups. In addition, there is a group created called all positions. There's a similar group created called HCSO all positions. And that's a kind of a collection of everything that everyone in that organization or all users need to see. So if I go back over here, look at HCSO all positions, these are all the identified HCSO positions we created. And all of those positions have access to these boards with this kind of access to it. So it's a way of setting up a broader level of access. You know, these are the common elements that everyone in this group needs to see. So, and that can also include other menu items, for example. So when you go into your WebEOC control panel and you look under menus, you know, this determines the boards you see there, the menus you see there. That's where all of that comes together. So that's kind of how the collection of stuff happens in WebEOC and how that access control is kind of granted. Any questions about that so far? No? Okay, good. So we said the boards have different levels of views. So I'm going to jump over into board building and board development so you can understand that relationship a little bit better. So like I said, each of these boards have some kind of permission involved. So if I jump over here, and this is something that only full administrators would have access to, and that is some board building. I'm just going to look for one of my more recent boards. Let's see, what do I want to look at? Oh, take a look at that. So every board in WebEOC, yeah, this will work good, okay. So I go into the board builder, I open a board. So every board in WebEOC has a couple of different things to it. So this is the developer backend of Javare is in the process of implementing a new development environment, because you're all going to laugh at this one and you're all going to hate it, because I've been hating this one for probably at least a dozen years now because it's terrible. It is very convoluted and very difficult to navigate. But the board editor is your editing tool in WebEOC. Every board has a couple of different what we call views, and that is just a way of looking at the board. So every different way of looking at the board has a view. At a very simple level, every board should have an input view, or how data gets into the board, and a display view, how users can see the board. very simple level. Also, the SQL table is available down here. You can't edit the SQL table from the board builder, but you can view the table and see what's in there. There's some things you can set there. The most important thing is whether a board is what we call incident independent or dependent. So an incident independent board means it doesn't matter what incident you're in WebEOC, the data is the same. Better example is the shelter board is a great example. It doesn't matter whether you're in the coronavirus event or Hurricane XYZ event. It doesn't matter which one you're in. If a shelter is full, it's full no matter what incident we're dealing with. But other boards may be dependent on the incident. So coronavirus testing is related only to coronavirus. You're not doing testing related to a hurricane. So if you're dealing with hurricane response and you pull up, well, I really shouldn't even be able to see it, but if you pull up the coronavirus testing board, there would be no data in there for you because it's not related to that incident. So that's where that is set. I'm going to go back to my views in a second and just give you an idea of how a view gets set up. Let me see, what view do I want to use? Yeah, it doesn't matter. So an input view, again, is a way that data gets input into WebEOC. This is a FEMA Community Lifelines board that I was doing some prototyping and testing on. It's actually probably never going to be used at this point, but that's another issue. So it's kind of a WYSIWYG editor of some kind. And you can add things to it and take a look at. And if you highlight one of the fields, for example, here is the code related to the field. Like I said, I'm not going to get deep into board building here. This tool is really painful to use. But if you go into the code editor, for example, this looks familiar to everyone. It is just, there you go, HTML, JavaScript, etc. And that is what it is. It is, again, not the best editor in the world to use, and they are developing a new editor that should be in place relatively soon in the scheme of things. But you can change things here in the editor, see how it looks in the design view. Not everything is reflected correctly operationally in this editor view. Again, you can see how, what these are in here. You can make changes in here. I'll show you some creating something simple in a moment. But that would be the input view. One of the things that is a little bit of an issue in WebEOC is that there's no notes in here. So it is definitely prudent if you're developing boards to add comments to these, which of course I did not do a good job of in this example. But I would definitely add comments to any kind of board development as you're doing this, make it easier. Filters are a way of, data link is linking data to other sources, which we don't really use a lot of. More on that at another time. The other thing is that there is a mobile widget, mobile app for WebEOC. So you can access WebEOC boards in a mobile optimized fashion. So you would turn that on. There's some other code changes to make in the WebEOC documentation about how to mobilize an app. Again, that's something to be covered another time. I'm just going to cancel that view for a second. So once you've created an input view, how do we display that to the user? So this is what a user would see based on that input view. So that the data that goes in there ends up in here, and that's how a user can see it. Again, same kind of thing when you get down to it. If I pop up in the code editor, there's all the code behind the scenes that we did for this particular view. So it is those views that get added to that position and group list. So when I set up a group for a board, that board gives a particular view of that position. A group gives the particular access to a particular view for that board, so that it would have access to the ESF1 display view as opposed to one of the other views in there. So this is what you're giving access to in that position list, in that group list. So that's how that relationship kind of works. Yeah, it is a little convoluted, to say the least. Or to show something a little cleaner, perhaps, of course, you'd save this when you're making changes. To create a board from scratch, create a board. You're going to give your board a name. I'm just going to call this Test Paul. Here's a board editor. And again, we're going to have create views, and it's going to be, there we go. Now, when I create a simple board, I like to name things simple. So if I'm just going to have a very simple input board, I'm going to call the first view input. I'm going to have a create a table. There are no existing tables to use. And then I can draw this board. It gives me the start of a template that may have nothing to do with what I want it to look like. But I can add fields to this if I want to. So here we have some edit tools. I can add a row below this, for example. I'm going to just do a simple vertical. There we go. I've added another row to it. And I'm just going to put some text in here and say some text. Whenever you add something in there, you have to apply it. There's some text. I can use some formatting things. I can bold it. I can, do all that kind of stuff to it. And then I can add a field here. Now, this is where I create fields for my database. I'm going to create a text field in there. I need to give it a name. By default, it's called text1. And I'm just going to call this, I don't know, name. And there we go. I've created my first field of useless information in this case. And if I go into the code editor, I can see this terribly elegant code that I just created. So, you can then work in here to add all kinds of other functionality. There's a WebEOC API. I think some of you may have sat through some of the WebEOC training from Javari, and there's a lot more that you can do in this particular area, of course, as you're developing a board. But that is what look like. We're going to save it, and there we go. We have our first input view saved like so. And then we would create a display view. I'm going to call this display. It's automatically going to find the table for me. If I have multiple tables, it'll find it. And here we go. It's going to give me the basic initial piece, but I can add whatever or however I want it to display. So the other field I want it to show, I'm going to put it here to the side, and I'm just going to add my field of name. No reason, just like that. Probably not a good design. And I would save that, and that's my display view. Then when I want to create a group for this board, that's how I would add these views to it and say, someone who has access to edit it would get edit access to it. Otherwise, someone would only get the display view with no edit access to it. Just a general bit on board design. When you're creating a board, I always find it useful to follow a little bit of a design process for it. I always sketch it out basically on paper. I draw what I'm looking for. I draw the views, identify what it is. We have created, and this is available on the main screen of WebEOC, we have identified a project request form, or a PIF, called a project initiation form. That is kind of a little bit of the process of identifying what are the necessary inputs, display modes, who's using the board, what it's used for, and kind of steps you through a little bit of a process of how to design a board. What are the elements you need before you start coding something in WebEOC? So, as opposed to just throwing some things together in the board editor. So that's just a little bit about how those pieces fit together. Now, another thing that we find in WebEOC that is really advantageous is that it is far, far easier, based on how this board builder tool currently sits, it is far, far easier to take a board, an existing board that kind of fits the idea of what you want to do, and export the board and then import it under a new name and then make edits and changes to this pre-existing board instead of having to do it all from scratch. So there's no reason that I want to start, and many of these boards we are revisions of existing boards. So for example, if I have a board for pods and I need to create a board for test collection sites, maybe there's a lot of common elements between those boards and a common design. So I can copy that board and rename it collection site or testing site board and rename the fields to meet that need and keep the general look and feel and general design of the board so things stay consistent. It just makes it a much easier way of developing boards in WebEOC. So we export and import boards into new names and reuse them all the time. It's just easier that way. So that's a little bit on how the board relationship fits into the groups and users in WebEOC. Any questions?
I don't have any questions so far.
Okay, good deal. So the other piece on the back end, you can also go in and administer incidents in WebEOC, and there's here we have our currently active incidents, for example. So you can make changes to those. Users have an incident creator tool. So generally, as an admin, you don't need to go in and do much for this. There's some other elements that I've included in a developer handbook related to this, but not really much. I'll go into the HRX incident. So you can also define what boards have access to an incident in here. And you can also, the tool in WebEOC, Javari Exchange, if you want to coordinate things in a board to the map view in Javari Exchange, you would need to turn that on here on the back end. Only admins can do that. In addition, incidents also have the ability to have a master view. So we've got this one set up as a training incident. So HRX 2020 you can use for, or 2021 rather, you can use for playing around, testing stuff, messing around, whatever. So it falls in the user menu under training. We've got a couple of other master views set up. So if you wanted to set up HCSO specific incidents, you could put them under the master view of HCSO. And I'm just going to flip over here to the user view for a second. And if I open up my list of incidents, you can see at the moment, there we go. We have a master view for archive incidents or old stuff. Incidents for the city of Tampa, there we go. Training incidents, like so. So those things are set up in a master view just to kind of organize the incident list for users. So that's how the master view is set up, and you can create new master views down, over here. I'm going to skip over the reporter and simulator because those aren't really used around in Hillsborough County. So under the process tab, we've got, like I said, the board view, and I'm going to go delete that horrible little test board I created for now. When you delete the board, it also deletes a table that was created with it. One thing in WebEOC, from a user perspective, if you are in a board, I'm going to switch myself to the HRX 2020, for example. If you are in a board in WebEOC, it doesn't really matter which one, but if you are in, let's see, I'm going to open up a board for the heck of it. Oh, let's open a status report. Okay, no, not that one. I'm going to open up. Anyway, so in WebEOC, if you open up a board and you delete a record as a user, be aware that records never actually get deleted in WebEOC. It merely doesn't show it in the user's display view anymore, but the entry remains in the database table. It just gets flagged with a kind of a yes/no field to display it or not. So you can create boards with filters to show deleted records and that kind of stuff. So nothing ever really gets deleted in WebEOC. So just be aware of that. So if you were to export data for a board, and you can do that. So if I go into the shelter board, for example, and say import export data, if I export the data for the shelter board, it may show records that have been deleted and records that are old and records that really aren't valid anymore for that reason. So just be aware of that. If you ever dump the data out of a board to be used for some other kind of reporting, you would need to create filter views for filtering out anything like that. So just be aware of that. It's another one of those quirks of WebEOC. The only other thing here in the process tab, OEM uses the agency template to just set up that main screen. So the duty officer in OEM would update this as they change duty officer every week. If there's a change in activation at the EOC, they would change that main screen. Just kind of be aware of that. Links in WebEOC are really just links. So you can add external links and then they can be added to the menus in WebEOC. So all of these links, not all of them are used. This is just a collection literally of external links that you can display or show in other places in WebEOC. And that would be a menu item, again, for the users in their control panel if you want to set it up that way. We'll come back to that in a second. When developing boards, we also have this concept of lists in WebEOC. So you can create a list of fields to call from a board. So if I want to use, let's see, what's a good list to use? Oh, I know. So rather than create a whole new drop-down list every time I build a board, let's say I have a list of status codes for the EOC, and there's 5 or 6 or 10 different boards I want to use this for, and this may change periodically. So instead of having to code it every time, I just am going to create a list so I can maintain the list here in this one place, and I basically call the list when I'm developing a board. There's a couple of different ways of doing that, but that way these lists are maintained in one place. So status codes, drop-down lists, resource types, all that kind of stuff is on this list views in here. And there's menus, which determines under the menu tab or menu item in the control panel, these are the different menus that may display here. So I can create a menu of items. So I'll show you the test menu. So some people, I think most of you probably will have the test menu available. So the test menu is a list of other boards and pieces in WebEOC that would show up under that menu name. So in the test menu, we have these boards available with these views. It's really the same as setting up kind of groups and positions relation, but I would then give a user access to a particular menu item, and then as a end user, you would have here under menus, these are those various menus they have access to, and there's that test menu with those elements in it. So we can create various collections of other stuff. This is also where those links come in, for example. So I would add those links in here and say, here's a great example. I created some links under that links tab. Here are the weather related links that I've added to a menu item called weather links, and they can pull those up. So it's just an easy way of finding stuff in WebEOC. One of the hardest things in WebEOC is just remembering where all the stuff is, because it's all spread out in different places. Once you get that hang of where stuff is, it actually is pretty simple. So, boards, and then you go, if you add links to that test menu, for example, they would show up here. System tab, this is where we define what an admin profile for partial admins have access to. So if you're a partial admin, an HCSO partial admin, these are the components in the admin panel that you have access to and can see. I'm going to just skip over the rest of the things in there because they're not relevant and probably would not be used except by full system admins. Same with plugins, mappings, and notifications. That's really full system admin stuff, not really terribly relevant at the moment. So that's an overview of the admin components in WebEOC. Questions? Or what else do you want to know? Does everyone need
Free
more?
to send those as well.
No questions right now. Everybody that's kind of backing me up are going to run into mostly user setups currently, Paul.
Yeah. So I'm going to return to user setups. Because that's the number one thing. The number one thing we get in WebEOC is always going to be, I don't know my password, I locked my ID, I need access to WebEOC, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just going to go in and actually walk you through creating users. So in WebEOC, what we're going to do, to create a user, we have a standard user convention. It's really the part of your email address before the @ sign. So if my name is John Smith, I'm going to be Smith J, because I'm John.Smith or Smith J at Hillsborough County, or something like that. Whatever my email address is, so it's going to be Smith J at whatever it is. We usually don't bother with secondary email or other information like that. That's not critical. Password, again, following a good password naming convention. WebEOC does not, in this current incarnation, restrict password formats. So you can't require a 12-character, multi-kind of character, capital, special character, etc. kind of password in there. So if I wanted to make a password to be really simple, it would let you do that, unfortunately. So you can set the initial password to password or Hillsborough or anything makes sense, and always make sure change password at next login. Most of the people you're going to create are going to be users. Don't worry about service and service as administrator. You won't be doing that. Full administrators are Marlon and Teresa and me for the moment, and some other folks from IIO. Partial admins are mostly you guys, and you would need to be set up as a partial admin. Sub administrators are restricted to the organization they're set up in. but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So if I set up a user in a organization, say HCSO, a sub-admin only has access to HCSO if I set them up that way. A partial admin has access to everything. I would leave the defaults here for user update, multiple login, and inactivity logout. So it automatically logs them out after X amount of time. And I don't remember what that's set to. This will keep them logged in only in one location. So if you want someone to be able to log in multiple times, you would enable that, but typically we leave that disabled. You don't want the user to update, or you want the user to be able to update their information in their profile. So you would leave that on. We'll show you that in a second. We don't bother with user color. We don't use color codes for users, so irrelevant. Expiration date, you can have a user ID expire on a certain date, like we did with the Border Patrol folks for Super Bowl. Even though for some reason it's not required in WebEOC, you do put in someone's name there. So you can fill out any of these that are relevant, but we would prefer you to add, a department of HCSO, and I'll show you why in a second, and provide an office phone and a contact phone number where possible. I think it's a good idea to provide as much of this information as you can get when setting up users. It's good to have because it's easier to find people in WebEOC with this information, but you'll see that none of this is required. Don't bother. I mean, some places actually attach a photo of the user. We don't bother doing that. That's not really necessary because it's not used for anything. So very easy to set that up. Once you set it up, determine what position. So for HCSO, we're going to say, okay, that is going to be a, what HCSO positions do they get? And you can select whichever ones. So this is when they log in, what position is going to be selected from their position dropdown. So we'll just say, it's going to be, this person's going to cover these 3 things or 2 things or the only thing they're going to do. So it can be one or multiple or anything. And, that's the positions they're going to see with whatever resulting access they have. Then you would just save that user ID. I'm not going to save this user ID. I'm going to go into, and then, so when we are looking for users, if I do a search for HCSO, you'll see that if I put HCSO in as the department field, it gives me an easy way to find everyone. So that is one of the searchable fields. It would be better if it was easier to search, but it's not. I can't search on multiple fields in the user profile except for what you see here. So HCSO would come up if I do that. So I can take a look at everyone there. I'm going to just arbitrarily pick a user for the heck of it. So there you go. Here's a great example of minimal information for a user profile. User for HCSO, all good. And department HCSO, person's name, that's fine. When a user logs into WebEOC, give me 1 second. So when a user logs into WebEOC, here's our login screen. That positions in that are the ones, and this is an admin level one, but they would be able to select what position they're logging in as, and they will see whatever the default groups are that have been set up for that position, as long as, and whatever incident they're logging into. So if I want it to be HCSO SWAT and logging into the Super Bowl, there's my user profile, so that whatever information we put in there shows up here. The user can change that information if they need to update it So I can write, I'm in Brandon, I'm not. So they can update that, and that would update their user profile, different phone number, whatever. And that's it. They would then be logged in for that position under that incident and have access to whatever that position has access to. So all of that basically brings us back to, this is what they see in their control panel. If they're part of that SWAT position, that's what the group access gives them in there. So that's how that kind of fits together. So, back to that, it's, like I said, fairly straightforward, fairly simple to use in that sense. Questions? Oops. No, nothing. Okay. Unless there's some specific things you would want to see or have specific questions, I don't really have much more to go over. Marlon, I know I sent you the developer handbook as well as the user guide updates.
Yes, I have it.
Okay, so and that has a little more detail and examples in there of some of that stuff.
No, today was perfect for what they'll be doing. Because HCSO is just now starting to really get into using. So like right now, we have a few other projects going on, and I have 3 backups now to help me with some user setup. So this is perfect. And this and the combination of the user guide that you gave me would be enough for what we're doing. 3 of us have the Javari training starting tomorrow through Friday. So we'll be doing that also.
Oh, good. Yeah, that'll give you a good idea of some of the underpinnings of that. And with any luck, you'll be able to get some insight into some of the new pieces of WebEOC that they're coming out. So a new version of WebEOC, version 9, is coming out momentarily, and that's got an entirely new developer environment going with it too.
Isn't it supposed to be better?
Oh, it's phenomenal. It's great. I mean, it's what they should have been doing already. It's also a different technology infrastructure. They're going to the .NET framework under that, and those kinds of things too. So there'll be some major shifts in WebEOC. I think what the user sees and how all this stuff works is pretty much going to remain the same, but the technical architecture is going to be different, which is a good thing. So yeah, you'll have a good time with that training. I'll be eager to hear how you like it.
We'll be in touch. I haven't got any more requests or anything from Deputy Crow in regards to if it's anything they want to add or take away. So I guess I can't. Is there a way that we can tell or audit users logging into the HCSO site?
Yeah, there is a you can kind of see the there's a couple of different ways, and none of them are really good. So there's the audit log. So you can see who logs in here. And you can do it by position. So you can, kind of filter it by position, for example. You can see, here's everyone who's logged in, at the moment, all that kind of stuff going on. So
Okay.
you can do that. You can do it by HCSO position, for example, and see what's in there. Have to make sure you should have access to the audit log thing. It's a limited capability, the current audit log, but that is also something that has been a long time request from WebEOC users of better audit capabilities. Just keep that in mind. But you can see who it's basically going to tell you who logged in. It's not going to tell you what they did. It's going to tell you who logged in, who logged off. So you can see that it's very limited in what they have. So someone logged in and they logged into that position, and in that instance, and then they logged off. That's
Now,
all.
the Hurricane 2021. So if we were to have a hurricane hit tomorrow, how would we take and duplicate that Hurricane?
No,
For
you wouldn't need to I mean, for me an actual activation.
yeah.
No, you wouldn't need to do that. So if you were to have something happen,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was a hurricane or anything else, you would just create an incident. You would go to the incident tab, create incident, and you would call it, and I would tend to call it something HCSO.
Mm-hmm.
So I would call it RX HCSO, and I would add it to a master view for HCSO.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. So now you could add whatever comments. So for HCSO only, and then what groups have access to it? HCSO all positions. So, and then if I save this, I've now created, if I go back to my incident list, here you go, I've got HRX HCSO. Now,
Mm-hmm.
whether you want to put it in the master view for training or under a master view for HCSO, but now you have an incident, you can do whatever you'd like with that. And there you go, you have an incident. It's blank, there's nothing in there. Couple of things though to keep in mind. So depending, let me know, I'm going to change my position to an HCSO.
It was a blank screen the whole time.
Okay, so here I am as an HCSO position. Important thing to keep in mind, any boards that are not specific to an incident, you have to be careful. So if you had access to the shelter board for this position, don't change anything in there. You know, you can only change things for, like, for example, special events. Special events is going to show any events going on, no matter what the incident is. So this would reflect, so if you were to add something in here as a test, it will show up everywhere. So if you see something that has real data in it, be careful with that. You know, but things like resource requests, for example, this is based on the incident you're in. So there's nothing in here because this is only tied to your incident was created. So you can do anything you want in here. It's not going to affect anything else. Any of the event reporting stuff, so the activity log or significant events, none of those have anything in it because they're going to be incident specific. So if you want to create a new record for a significant event log, you can do it just in here. All good. So you can do whatever you want in those. Something like
So that person's position, so that setup that we demoed for HSD for the law enforcement side, showing these tabs here that you're showing right now on the boards, menus, tools, plugins, that setup is determined based on the position, not the event.
yes, exactly. This is determined by the position. So this position has
Gotcha.
access to those boards. And then you are in this event, and you can change, you know, any event that's in that list. You can jump to any event. So, you know, yeah, it's also important to always remember what event you're in.
Do you guys, after a year, do you archive the events, or how would that work?
Well, they're supposed to. So when an event is over, like Super Bowl, for example, should be moved now to archived incidents, although I don't think, you know, anything really happened during the Super Bowl. There's probably very little data in there. So they should move that. The OEM administrator should move that to archived incidents, And eventually, what they should be doing is deactivating them. Now, there's no offline archive in WebEOC, which has always been a problem. But what we typically do, I'm going to do this anyway. I'm going to go to Hurricane Eta, and so we add it to the master view of archived incidents and leave it there. So if there's any after action stuff, any reporting, any things like that people need, they can just grab it. It's just not at the top of the list. And then after some amount of time determined by the agency or organization, all you do is you go into the incident and you turn off this active button. And that marks the incident as inactive. And if I go to up here and say view inactive incidents, these are all the incidents that have been turned off. Some of them are old training incidents. So all of these stay here. These are all still in WebEOC. They've not been deleted. I don't like deleting incidents unless it's like really garbage, a test thing you just did quickly and don't need to get rid of it. So you can always go back to an old incident, for example, and make it active again and add it to another different master view. If you wanted to go and use stuff from the incident or review things or anything like that. But users will not see things that are not active. So they will not appear. They'll only appear in this incident tab if you say, show me, filter it to show me inactive incidents.
Okay.
But you should make a determination of how long do you want to keep an incident active? Where do you want to keep it? You could create different master views within here. So we just have this for live incidents in HCSO. Let's say you wanted to create a HCSO training incident or master view. So you could create a master view called HCSO training and put any training incidents you want in there, so as not to confuse them with real world stuff. That's that's up to you.
Okay. I have no other question.
Okay, good deal. Well, if that is it from everyone, I will let you guys get on with your day. This was easy, and like I said, it's once you know where things are in WebEOC, the actual mechanics of it are pretty simple. It's just remembering where stuff is. It's not the best user interface design in the world. As always, any other questions come up, feel free to reach out to me or Teresa over there. Happy to help. At least I'm happy to help until my contract's over at the end of the month. So in the meantime, anything I can do, just let me know, and that should cover it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Paul.
Anytime. Have a great day, everyone.
All right.
Bye-bye.